Thanks, Gloves. Yeah, as you said, we're a New Zealand Merino company. My name's Matt Hand. I'm the General Manager for Global Supply. You probably don't know a lot about New Zealand Merino Company, although some of you do know a fair bit actually. But we were established in the late 90s. In New Zealand, the wool board was disbanded in the late 90s, and the merino growers there needed somebody to add value to the merino wool clip. And that's when we were born. That is our job. We are a marketing and innovations company. We build value and create demand for merino wool. You see the icebreaker gear that I'm wearing and others are wearing too was really at the advent of New Zealand Merino Company. We created that market segment along with icebreaker. I'm not sure where we'd be without the outdoor activewear segment today in the wool industry. But what you want to know today is what is the demand for ethically sourced wool? What's the demand for non-mulesed wool, and why are you sort of seeking the breeding objectives that you are? We need to think about what we used to have in Australia and globally. We used to have this huge volume capacity to produce wool. In the early 90s in Australia, we produced 1 billion kilos of greasy wool. Today that number is 270 million kilos, so we have dropped 73% from our peak production. But think about the composition of our sheep flock today in Australia as well. We used to have a huge majority of merinos, and of course we had a pretty good population of Polworths, Corriedales, and we're moving away from the apparel breeds there. Now we have a tiny flock, comparably, of apparel wool growing sheep in Australia. So in order to drive markets for that wool, we need to look at how we build value. How's that going? Yeah. So in 2007, New Zealand Merino Company developed the ZQ standard, which was the first ethical standard for wool in the world. And that was really born around the conversation of mulesing. We accepted in New Zealand that mulesing had a limited life, and we needed to consider how we were going to sort of address consumers' needs and wants and brands' needs and wants around the mulesing conversation. So we produced an ethical standard which ultimately brands sought their wool through. So the demand was feeding from brands through ZQ to growers like yourselves. And the whole concept is to align this value chain, to align the best brands in the world with the best wool growers in the world. And having a knowledge of where your wool is going helps you establish your breeding objectives, helps you establish how you are going to participate in the market and what your overall objectives are. But that connection is key. It's working backwards through the market, which has not typically been done in Australia. So ZQ is central to everything that's happening on farm, but it also links these key areas of environmental sustainability, traceability, animal welfare, third-party auditing, production science. I mean, ZQ sits at the centre supporting all of those aspects around what you do on farm. It's also our job to make sure it's possible for you to implement those practices on farm. There's no point putting a whole lot of restrictions over wool growing if you can't actually practice those requirements on farm. So in 2007, this is what we looked like. These were our brand partnerships around the world, which even today, if we look at our competitors who have a few brand partners, that's actually pretty impressive. A lot of people have 1 or 2 brands that they work with directly. In 2007, we had that group there, and you can see some of our foundation brands as Icebreaker, Laura Piana, John Smedley, Smart Wool. It's grown a little bit, and we don't have enough space for them all. We've got over 120 brands today that we deal with, and those brands are all sourcing their wool through our ethical standards, which and they're offering their support to you to make sure that they can secure the volume of wool they need to meet their growth expectations. So I mentioned before that we had to build value, and we also had to look at the market differently. This is the old volume-driven wool model. We produced wool, we stuck it in the market, and we asked the market what they were prepared to pay for it. That's a commodity system, you know, that's how we produce volume products. It doesn't really work. It doesn't work in wool, doesn't work for apparel. What we need to do is relook at that and place the end user at the centre. So there's all this insight and innovation moving back and forth between everyone involved in innovation and customer experience, productivity and channels to market. That information is flowing between all of those sectors back from the end user so that we understand what our consumers actually asking for. Remember the old saying, customers are always right? It does apply in our industry. It applies in every industry. We've tended to ignore it, but not at NZM. When you join ZQ, you become part of the two most wanted standards in the world. We have ZQ, the world's first ethical standard that we've talked about, and RWS with the responsible wool standard, which I guess a lot of you know about. But in brief, it's owned by Textile Exchange in Europe. It's a non-profit organisation and that sets ethical standards around wool as well. It's a compliance model and it's very well recognised in the market. All of our ZQ growers pick up RWS certification in the same process, which gives us a whole of clip approach. We have brand partner contracts that I've mentioned, and we're going to go into a little bit more detail about that in a moment. But basically, the pinnacle is to take a ZQ contract opportunity for your fleece and ZQ offers. You have RWS contract opportunities, and the remainder of your clip can go to auction with RWS certification, which means you've left the commodity market behind. Today you're sitting, at that point, you'll sit about 10% above the commodity market. So, just, Dave, I just threw this slide in about 10 minutes ago because you did make a comment that we have no control over the wool market. You threw the EMI up there, and that's exactly right. If you're participating in the day-to-day auction market, you've got no control. You'll spend 12 months working bloody hard to produce a beautiful fibre, and you'll put it into auction and see how the day goes. And you'll get exporters like myself sitting in the auction room looking for an opportunity. But it is up to you how you participate in the market. You don't have to take that risk and just throw it in auction. This is the 18.5 micron mills and non-mills markets over the past 10 years. So if we look at the red line's, turn that off, no, cool. The red line is the 18.5 non-mills, cease mills market. That's fluctuated enormously. The purple line is the 80th percentile. The green line represents our contracts, the ZQ contracts for the same period of time. So if you're hopeful to achieve this level at the top all the time, send your wool to auction. If you are happy with the 80th percentile and you have a long-term contract in front of you offering that economic stability that we all love, then this is the type of product that you need to consider really carefully. This just talks about the market opportunity. The direction that you're all heading in or already in is that ethical wool space. It only represents about 3% of wool fibres sold in the world today. So the growth opportunity in the ethical wool space is enormous. There's no reason not to be a part of it because it will grow, and I guess it's probably always better to get in early rather than watch and see the others benefit early on. So that's it from me, unless you've got any particular questions. We're then going to go on to Emma, who's going to talk about ZQRX, our regenerative index product. But first of all, we've got a little short video.
Wool is having a moment. There is just this enormous potential for the industry, and there's some challenges, no doubt, but the sort of work that New Zealand Merino is doing, and I think in the fashion industry as a whole, there is just an enormous potential for the fibre. And I think finally, you know, the industry's found a bit of a voice. They found a way of telling their story, and I'm hugely excited about it. So very excited to be on the front edge of what I think is a great time to be in the business that you're in.
Thanks, Dean. We thought we'd use Tim so we could do the quick mic change, but in case you missed the start of it, that was Tim Brown, who's one of the founders of Allbirds, the world's fastest growing shoe company and a real innovator in the wool space, so using 19.5 and 17.5 micron wool to make shoes, and only started a number of years ago and hugely successful. So his key message there was that wool's having a moment, and it's a really exciting time to be in this space. And there's a whole bunch of reasons that it is exciting, but one of those is this rise of, conscious consumerism. There has never been a greater focus on the environment, and as a textile industry, we actually have a lot of challenges that we need to overcome. And textile industry is the third largest greenhouse gas polluter. The rise of fast fashion means that the average garment is worn 7 times. The rise of synthetics means that our waterways are filling up with plastic particles. There's a lot of negative stories out there in the fashion game, but this is all feeding into brands and purpose-led companies wanting to support natural fibres and wanting to support wool. So with all these challenges, there's a lot of great opportunities to connect with our brand partners, to showcase what's actually happening on farm. And for ones like VF Corp, who own a whole range of brands, but Icebreaker and Smart Wool are their 2 wool-centric ones, they're campaigning and heroing natural fibres and wool. Icebreaker have made a commitment that by the end of next year, there won't be any synthetic materials in any of their products. That includes zips, buttons, tags, the whole 9 yards. So what we can do to really feed into that is a huge opportunity for us as an industry, but we need to get better at actually communicating that. So Matt touched briefly on certification, and don't get me wrong, audits are really important. We all love them. Said no one ever, but they are really important. We need audits so that we can reassure our consumers that what we are doing on farm is good for the environment, it's good for the animals, it's good for the people who are farming them. But there's so much more to farming than what can ever be included in an audit. If I made an audit to cover every possible thing on farm, I don't think we'd have many grass suppliers. I wouldn't want to be in the job, and it wouldn't fit the variety and difference, the range of businesses that we have in our industry. So we need to have those standards to make sure that we are doing what's acceptable and what our market expects of us. But we also need to move beyond just relying on an audit system to tell our story. Because a tick box, one size fits all approach is not going to suit all our growers, and it's not going to get the best value for us when we try to market our product. So how we move beyond certification and beyond, hey, good enough is good enough, is the next key thing. And so for us at NZM, it's not just let's do an audit, but let's see what people are doing above audit level. So this is our regenerative index, ZQRX. What it highlights is we have ZQ at the centre. That's the audit standard. Farmers are doing a lot every day that goes above and beyond that. They currently don't get any credit for. They don't get recognised for maintaining and conserving native vegetation on farm, for investing in better breeding and management to be more efficient, to produce more from less, to manage their grazing and protect soil health. All these things that for you guys, it's good business, it makes sense, it's what you want to do to protect your business for years to come, but it also benefits all of us. It benefits the consumers, it benefits our environment. and you should get rewarded for it. But we also have to be able to prove it. You know, we can share these stories and we can, hey, pat ourselves on the back, aren't we doing a good job? But we also have to be able to prove it. And that's something that's coming through more and more, is that purpose is great, and having a direction and a brand with a vision has previously worked, and a lot of people have backed that. But now brands are under more and more pressure to be able to prove that. And so as a marketing and innovations company, which is what we aim to do at NZM, we wouldn't be doing you guys a service if we didn't then provide you with the tools to measure, to quantify what's happening on farm and communicate that to market. And so that's, for us, ZQRX is not only celebrating what's happening on farm, but it's quantifying it. There's a lot of really positive things that are there. We have to have the data to back up our storytelling. If we think about this in terms of a specific example and what it means for brands, you know, Allbirds and Tim Brown's company, they put a carbon figure on every single product that they sell. That carbon figure is based off an industry average. There's one figure for the whole industry for merino wool. Cool. That's what they have to use. That's the technology or the data that's available. What we can do through ZQRX is go, okay, how can we measure what's happening on our farms, give credit for good practice for sequestration that's happening, because currently the industry average won't recognise any sequestration. It's purely just one half of the equation and just emissions. So let's give credit to that. Let's capture stuff through ZQRX. Let's incentivise and, you know, reward positive improvements. And then let's help our brand partners thrive as well. You know, there'd be no point Allbirds putting a number out there and then never improving against it. Like any good benchmark, it's a starting point, and then we have to work on it further. So there's that whole component of measuring and communicating these stories to our consumers. And there's a whole heap, and it's exciting that our brand partners are working with us on this. Because I get it, it can be really intimidating and daunting as someone who just wants to work with livestock and be outside and do what we love, to then have this wall of compliance and environmental pressures and different things coming at us. But the fact that we have these brands who want to tell our story, have our backs, and to work together so that we all win, that's the really exciting part for us. And with all this talk on, you know, the activism and the people challenging us, it's actually about bringing it back to the people on the ground, to the actionists, because it's all very well people, you know, protesting in the streets or demanding action, but then someone's got to go out and do it. And in our minds, the farmers are the actionists. It's the farmers who are out there day in, day out doing the work. And so it's how we celebrate what you do and bring that back to the consumer that's really critical. So yeah, more than happy to field any questions now. And by that I mean fire any way to Matt. I'll loiter in the corner if you want to talk about more the certification stuff. But yeah, Matt and I are over here, and yeah, really excited to be working with everyone. Really grateful to the Mumblebone team for giving us the mic and letting us share what we see in terms of where the trends are with ethical wool and consumers. Gloves.
Thanks, Daniel and Matt. And are there any questions around this? Yeah.
Do you have a view on how the EU is sort of potentially ranking wool or cotton below synthetics?
Yeah, so the question is around, and it's the EU, but it's also the index I talked about, the Higg index. So there's, it quantifies the environmental impact of a bunch of different textiles, including greenhouse gas emissions, water use, chemical use, a heap of things. And at the moment, wool comes out in a really poor position compared to some synthetic garments, and we're doing a lot in that space. We don't think it's a fair reflection. We, working with them and sort of showing the life cycle assessments that we've done on farms to that, from a carbon perspective, the tools that they have are designed to measure synthetic items, and synthetic items can't sequester carbon in a natural system like where our sheep are grazing. And so, yeah, Kirill, I don't know how technical to get, but more than happy to answer any questions on that. But yes, it's a really flawed measurement system. We're working really closely with the people who do those Higg index scores to try and get more science into it and get more robustness, and our brands are doing the same. And there's been a few campaigns recently to really try and up the information that goes into it so it does reflect more accurately on what the difference is, because having a tool that measures factory inputs versus a tool that measures what happens on a farm, two very different systems, but at the moment it's one tool to measure them both. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I guess it could cause quite a disruption if consumers are given, you've got the EU saying this is where things should be ranked, which is obviously wrong, but it could change what some of the brands might be forced to do. Not what they'd like to do, what they get forced to do.
Yeah, and so I guess if we sat back and did nothing, then absolutely that would be the only information that those brands have to work with, and they probably would go, be way easier if we just went recycled polyester, let's do that. And that would be bad for us, and so we're trying to engage early, working with our brands, and then if we can show the data on our farms, the Higg index might still say that wool's bad, but if our brand partners can go, yep, average wool's bad, but we know that our ZQRX wool is actually this because we measure it, we quantify it, and that's just adding value and stickiness to our brand partners. So if anything, it just means that we need to work faster and harder, and we're trying. But yeah, it's a massive challenge.
Anyone else?
What do you need from farmers to make that happen?
Eventually access to data will be a big thing, and so we're platforms to make that as streamless as possible, but a lot of stuff farmers are already doing that we just aren't capturing. I mean, like there's a heap of stuff that the audits do require, and Ferg mentioned farm environment plans, and it's just documenting what is actually happening on farm. It's really hard to get an accurate carbon number as a farmer right now, so that's something that we're working on. I don't believe that the tools are actually there to make it easy for farmers to engage in that space, but if you do get the opportunity to be involved in any trials or have people on farm, then figures that are as close to your property as possible are always going to be the best thing. So knowledge is power. If you can work out where you are, that's great, but at the same time it's a really tricky space to be trying to learn in, because everyone's learning at the same time, and the tools are still pretty clunky.
How much impact is issues around animal welfare, pain relief during castration or tail docking, those sorts of issues, coming into this picture as well, not just breeding impact?
Yeah, absolutely, and that's for us when we, that index was sort of, for us, what regenerative wool is. It's not saying that farms have to farm in a specific way using a specific set of practices, but it's much more whole farm systems, animals, environment and people, and the animal welfare stuff is still really, really critical, and ZQ as an audit standard was born out of animal welfare, and that foundation will still remain. So in terms of audit criteria, yeah, non-mulesing is the very starting point, and then it is things like pain relief at marking time, animal health plans, feed plans, and so there's nothing, but it is becoming more and more consumer expectations, and that's the starting point now. So yeah, that's a big part of it as well, and RWS is the same. They require pain relief at marking time.
And then the second question I had, so DMZ are really pushing proof. At the end of the day, everyone's going to be trying to prove everything, and so the risk of that could happen is that there's a bit of greenwash, that happens in the regen space. Is there any scepticism that's kind of building in the customer base going, I don't know about that, just can you show me more?
Yeah, I think there's scepticism about people saying, hey, we're sustainable.
Yeah.
And another reason why the regen conversation came about with our brand partners is we don't want to, but yeah, that was kind of an overused word, was sustainable, and so regenerative doesn't have to be, one view of regenerative is quite set in terms of what practices are acceptable or not, Another view is just regenerative means to improve, and I think everyone in their farming businesses wants to do better and is always striving to do better. Otherwise, they'd probably retire. If they thought if you're done, can't do any better, retire. And so for us, regenerative is like just continuous improvement across a whole range of areas. But I think absolutely there's the risk of people watering it down, and another reason why data is really important so that you can actually show the outcomes. So for us, you could do the same practices in different environments, and you could do them here down the road in New Zealand and get 3 completely different outcomes. But the outcomes is what matter. You know, we want good outcomes. We want more efficient process, production. We want better carbon storage, better animal welfare. Those outcomes and how you achieve them, that's what we want to measure.
But you're not getting pushback yet for more proof.
No, I think brands would love us to get there faster maybe, but no, I think we're working with them and the growers to sort of to work in what is required, and yeah, yep.